My dear friends, let us begin where the greatest misunderstandings begin, inside the word collapse. People imagine it as something dramatic, like a building falling, a villain punished, a theatrical moment of justice, but in the psyche, collapse is rarely loud. It is usually silent. It is an inward crumbling, an invisible implosion, when an entire inner strategy for survival suddenly loses its target. And this is why the narcissist collapses when the empath finally sees the truth. Not because the empath becomes cruel, not because the empath attacks, but because the empath withdraws the one substance the narcissist cannot manufacture alone, an enchanted mirror. For the narcissistic personality, the relationship is not a relationship in the human sense. It is not a meeting of two souls where each is allowed to be real. It is an arrangement between an inner emptiness and an outer supply. The narcissist does not love you as an individual. The narcissist loves the function you perform in the architecture of their psyche. And you, as the empath, often do not notice this at first, because your nature is to assume hidden humanity. You interpret cruelty as fear. You interpret manipulation as pain. You interpret the mask as a wound. And in a certain sense you are not wrong, there is pain. But what you fail to recognize is this. Pain does not always create tenderness. Pain can also create a ritual of domination. Pain can create a religion of control. Now I must speak carefully here, because modern people have a strange habit. They hear psychological truth as moral accusation. They want a villain and a saint, yet the unconscious is not moral, it is compensatory. It does not ask whether you are good, it asks whether you are whole, and most empaths, if we are honest, are not yet whole. They have a spiritual gift that has been welded to a childhood wound. Their empathy is not merely sensitivity, it is a strategy. Their love is not merely love, it is a bargain with fate. And this is precisely why the narcissist is drawn to them, as iron is drawn to a magnet, because the narcissist also lives from a bargain. If I control the outer world enough, I will never have to feel the inner void, so we have two invisible contracts meeting in the same room. The empath's contract often sounds like this, though it is rarely spoken aloud. If I am understanding enough, if I am patient enough, if I sacrifice my needs enough, then I will finally be safe, finally be chosen, finally be loved. This is the contract of the good child, the archetype of the one who survives by pleasing, harmonizing, carrying the emotional burdens of the household. Many of you know this archetype intimately. It is the one who reads faces like weather. It is the one who can sense disappointment before it is spoken. It is the one who learns early that love is not a gift but a performance. And the narcissist contract? It sounds like this. If I can keep the other person admiring me, fearing me, needing me, then I will not collapse into shame, because behind the grandiosity, behind the superiority, the entitlement, the coldness, there is often a core of unprocessed humiliation. A wounded child who concluded, if I am not special, I am nothing. If I am not above others, I will be destroyed. This is not an excuse. It is an origin, and if you do not understand origins, you will spend your entire life fighting symptoms. But now let us come to the moment of truth, the moment the empath finally sees. This moment is not simply intellectual, It is not merely, ah, yes, I understand narcissism now. No. The moment the empath sees the truth is an alchemical shift in the psyche. It is the shift from enchantment to clarity, and clarity is unbearable for certain unconscious systems, especially systems built on illusion. You see, the narcissist cannot survive psychologically without a certain spell being maintained. The spell is not only deception of the empath, it is deception of the narcissists themselves. The narcissistic structure is like a palace constructed over a sinkhole. The palace is decorated, impressive, filled with mirrors and gold, but beneath it is a terror, the fear of being ordinary, dependent, vulnerable, human. The narcissist experiences human limitation as humiliation. Therefore, they cannot relate, they can only manage. They manage perceptions, they manage emotions, they manage narratives, they manage your attention like a currency. And the empath, until awakening, is the perfect currency. Because your empathy is not passive, it is energetic. It radiates meaning into things. It gives significance to small gestures. It sees potential where there is emptiness. It sees soul where there is strategy. The empath does something extraordinary and dangerous. They invest life into the narcissist's mask. They breathe warmth into a cold structure. They speak to the narcissist as if speaking to the hidden child inside them, hoping that child will emerge and love them back. In myth, this is the maiden descending into the underworld to redeem the cursed prince. It is beauty trying to awaken the beast. It is psyche walking through impossible tasks for Eros. But modern empaths do not realize they are living a myth, they think they are living a relationship. And myths are not gentle, they are forces of transformation. And the moment you awaken inside a myth, you can no longer play your assigned role. That is the threat. So what is the truth the empath finally sees? It is rarely a single fact. It is a pattern recognized by the psyche. It is the realization that the relationship is designed to keep you confused, that the apologies are instruments, that the tenderness is timed, that the cruelty is not accidental, that the chaos is not unfortunate, it is functional, because confusion binds you. When you are confused, you seek resolution. When you seek resolution, you keep engaging. When you keep engaging, the narcissist remains supplied. The narcissist's deepest control is not control over your actions, it is control over your meaning making. They want to occupy your interpretation of reality. They want your mind to become a court in which they are always on trial, always defended, always analyzed. As long as you are still interpreting, you are still attached, and as long as you are attached, the spell remains. But then comes a day quiet, almost unimpressive externally, when the empath's psyche stops negotiating with illusion. Something ancient awakens in you. You no longer ask, what did they mean? You no longer ask, is it my fault? You no longer ask, maybe I'm too sensitive. You no longer search the narcissist's words for hidden love. Instead, you begin to read the energy, the rhythm, the repetition, the consistent absence of conscience. And in that moment, the empath does something that looks small but is metaphysically enormous. They stop giving their attention as a sacrament. Attention is not merely focus. Attention is libido, the psychic life force. The narcissist feeds on it not only emotionally, but existentially, your attention confirms their existence. Your emotional reactions confirm their power. Your longing confirms their centrality. Even your tears confirm their significance. They become the sun around which your inner world rotates. The empath's awakening is the end of that solar system. Now imagine the narcissist when this occurs. Imagine someone who has lived through mirrors, suddenly surrounded by glass that no longer reflects. Imagine someone who has lived through dominating reactions, suddenly facing a person who does not react. Imagine someone who has lived through narrative control, suddenly encountering a mind that will not argue. This is collapse. Collapse is the moment the narcissist realizes the empath is no longer hypnotized. The empath is no longer a field that can be harvested. The empath is no longer spiritually available to be drained. And do you know what happens then? A strange phenomenon of the psyche. The narcissist's shadow begins to surface rapidly because the empath has stopped carrying it. This is crucial. The empath in such relationships often becomes the container for the narcissist's disowned humanity. The narcissist projects weakness onto you, sensitivity onto you, neediness onto you, emotionality onto you. They place the burden of feeling into your body so they can remain superior, and you, because you are trained to carry it. You feel for both of you. You mourn for both of you. You apologize for both of you. You repair for both of you. You become the psyche's servant. But once you see the truth, you stop volunteering as the container. So where does the disowned material go? It returns to its owner. This is why the narcissist panics. This is why they rage. This is why they suddenly become sentimental. This is why they love bomb. This is why they threaten. This is why they smear your name. These are not random behaviors. They are emergency rituals of control. They are the psyche attempting to restore the old arrangement. Yet the empath's new sight is terrifyingly simple. You no longer ask for proof that you are loved. You no longer ask for closure. You no longer ask for explanation. Your soul recognizes the pattern and withdraws. This withdrawal is not coldness. It is individuation. Individuation, this word has been terribly misunderstood. People imagine it means self-improvement, but it is not. It is the journey by which the psyche returns to wholeness. It is the end of living through projection. It is the end of living through borrowed identities. And in the context of narcissistic entanglement, individuation means you stop confusing pain with destiny. You stop confusing intensity with intimacy. You stop confusing trauma bond with soul connection. Now, because this lecture is mystical, we must also speak in symbols, for the psyche speaks in symbols long before it speaks in concepts. I want you to imagine a dream. In the dream, you are in a hall of mirrors, hundreds of mirrors, reflecting you endlessly. At first, it feels beautiful like a palace, but as you walk deeper, you begin to realize the mirrors are distorting. Some make you appear smaller, some make you appear ugly, some make you appear monstrous. You begin to panic. Which one is real? And then, at the end of the hall, you see a figure, a regal person seated on a throne watching you. They say nothing, but you feel that your confusion entertains them. That figure is the narcissistic archetype, the false king, the tyrant of perception, the ruler who needs others to be disoriented so that they can feel sovereign. Now the turning point of the dream, you stop running from mirror to mirror. You stop asking the mirrors to define you. You turn away from the throne. You walk toward a door you hadn't noticed before. It is small, unimpressive, but real. You open it. You step out, and immediately the air changes. That door is truth. That door is the self. The narcissist collapses when you walk out because the palace was never about you. It was about the narcissist maintaining a kingdom, and your presence, your attention, was the taxation system of that kingdom. Your emotional labor was the workforce. Your forgiveness was the law. Your hope was the propaganda. Your empathy was the electricity that kept the whole palace illuminated. So when you leave, the lights go out. Now, do not misunderstand. This does not mean the narcissist suddenly becomes humble and enlightened. The collapse I speak of is psychological destabilization. It can manifest as rage, depression, frantic pursuit, obsessive stalking, sudden replacement of you with another, or a dramatic public performance of victimhood. Often the narcissist will attempt to recruit others to become new mirrors quickly, friends, lovers, audiences, because the psyche cannot tolerate the void. Yet internally, something more terrifying begins. Shame rises. The narcissist is forced to face the question they have been running from their entire life. Who am I when no one is admiring me? Who am I when no one is afraid of me? Who am I when I cannot extract attention from a sensitive soul? This question is lethal to the false self. And here we reach the deepest secret. Narcissism is not fundamentally arrogance, it is a defense against annihilation. The false self is built to prevent the person from collapsing into a primitive sense of worthlessness. When the empath sees the truth and withdraws, the narcissist's false self loses a major pillar of confirmation, and when the pillar weakens, the whole structure trembles. This trembling can look like hatred toward you, because in the narcissist's distorted logic, you become the one who caused their pain, when in truth you merely stopped medicating their void. Now let us turn the light toward you, empath, because it is not enough to diagnose the narcissist. The soul does not awaken through diagnosis. The soul awakens through self-recognition. Why did you stay so long? Why did you interpret cruelty as a puzzle to solve? Why did you believe that if you loved hard enough, you could redeem a person who did not want to be known? This is where the lecture becomes holy. Because the empath is not merely a victim, the empath is a participant in a pattern. And the moment you see that you were participating, you also realize something liberating. You can stop. Many empaths carry a wound so old they cannot name it. It is not merely abandonment, it is something more subtle. The wound of being trained to earn love. If you had to earn love, then love is not natural, love is conditional. Love is anxious. Love is always one mistake away from vanishing. So, when you meet the narcissist who makes love feel scarce, you feel at home, you feel familiar terror, and the psyche often confuses familiarity with fate. This is one of its darkest tricks. The narcissist collapses when you see the truth because your seeing breaks the oldest spell in your lineage. The spell that says love must be earned through self-erasure. And when you break a generational spell, those invested in it will panic. Even the narcissist is not only an individual. Sometimes the narcissist becomes a symbol, a living representative of the oppressive psychological structure you were trained inside. Your awakening is not only personal, It is archetypal. It is as if the good daughter, the good woman, the good empath inside you finally refuses the altar. This is why the narcissist collapse feels dramatic. It is the collapse of a ritual. In the next part of our exploration, we will go deeper into what happens in the unconscious at the exact moment the empath sees how the narcissist attempts to re-enchant you, how the psyche stages false awakenings, how guilt is used as spiritual blackmail, and why the empath's silence becomes the most terrifying weapon, not because it punishes, but because it reveals reality without debate. And now, my dear friends, as we continue, I want you to feel the atmosphere changing, not in the outer room, but in the inner room of your own psyche. Because when we speak of the empath finally seeing the truth, we are not speaking of a mere psychological insight. We are speaking of a spiritual threshold, a door in the unconscious that cannot be closed once opened. And this is precisely why the narcissistic structure reacts as if it were facing death. In a certain sense, it is not the death of the body, but the death of an arrangement, the death of a supply line, the death of a false kingdom. You must understand something essential. The narcissist is not primarily addicted to pleasure. They are addicted to control of meaning. And the empath, especially the empath trained in childhood to be good, to be understanding, to be the healer, to be the one who keeps peace, is not primarily addicted to love. They are addicted to hope. Hope is their drug. Hope is their religion. Hope is the spell by which they tolerate the intolerable. So when I say the empath finally sees the truth, it means the empath's hope collapses. And when the empath's hope collapses, the narcissist's control collapses. For the narcissist lives inside your hope like a parasite lives inside a host. This is not poetry. It is psychic reality. Because hope, unexamined hope, keeps you in conversation with the mask. It keeps you negotiating with a mirage. It keeps you handing your inner energy to someone who has no intention of meeting you in truth. And here is a paradox that shocks many people. The narcissist does not fear your anger as much as they fear your clarity. Anger still proves attachment. Anger still proves you are in the field. Anger still proves they have significance inside you. Even hatred can be used as supply. Because hatred is still attention. The narcissist can endure your fury far more easily than they can endure your indifference. Because indifference is not emotional withdrawal. It is symbolic death. When you become emotionally unavailable to the narcissistic system, the narcissist begins to experience what I might call a primitive terror, the terror of being unseen. For narcissism is, in its deepest form, the illness of a self that cannot exist from within. It requires an external witness at all times. Without an external witness, the narcissist feels like smoke without a fire, like a shadow without a body, like a mask floating in empty air. Now, let us go deeper, because we must not only describe what happens externally, love bombing, raga, smear campaigns, we must enter the mechanism. We must go into the subterranean chambers of the unconscious, where these events are born. Only there will you understand why the collapse happens with such intensity, and why the empath's seeing is experienced as a catastrophe. In the narcissistic psyche there is often a split, an ancient severing. One part of the psyche is inflated, grandiose, demanding, contemptuous. It speaks as if it were a god. It believes it deserves special treatment, endless admiration, exemption from accountability. This is the false self, the tyrannical archetype, the inner dictator, but behind it, buried like a rejected child behind the throne, is another part shamed, terrified, humiliated, often frozen at the age of its first psychological injury. This is the wounded child who concluded to be human is to be wounded, to be vulnerable is to be destroyed. Therefore, I must never be weak again. And from that vow, the false self is created as armor. And what is the empath's role in this architecture? The empath becomes the stage on which the false self performs divinity. The empath becomes the priestess of the narcissist's illusion. The empath, without realizing it, participates in a ritual. They feed the god and sacrifice the self. But the moment the empath sees the truth, this ritual is interrupted. The priestess leaves the temple, the audience leaves the theater, the god is left on stage alone, staring into darkness, hearing their own voice echo without applause. And in that moment, the narcissistic psyche must face the unbearable. The wounded child behind the throne begins to rise, not gently, not slowly, but with the pressure of years of repression. This is collapse. Collapse is not a moral consequence, it is a mechanical consequence. The false self cannot maintain itself without constant reinforcement. It is like an inflated balloon that must be continuously filled with air. When the empath withdraws, the air supply stops, and then, naturally, the structure begins to deflate. Now, the narcissist will attempt to prevent this deflation at all costs. And here we must speak of what I call the re-enchantment process, the rituals by which the narcissist tries to pull the empath back into trance. When you see the truth, you become dangerous not because you become violent, but because you become unhypnotizable, and the narcissist, sensing this, will often intensify the enchantment. They will act more tender, more remorseful, more vulnerable. They will suddenly speak of trauma, childhood pain, spiritual awakening, personal transformation. They may cry, they may confess, they may even appear to see themselves, but you must understand, narcissistic confession is often not repentance. It is strategy. It is a performance designed to restore supply, because the narcissist does not feel remorse as the normal soul feels remorse. In many cases, remorse would require the narcissist to acknowledge the reality of the other person's inner world, and that reality threatens their control. They can feel regret that they are losing supply, regret that their image is threatened, but remorse, which includes genuine empathy, is rare in the severely narcissistic structure. This is why the empath must become extremely sober after seeing the truth, because the narcissist's greatest weapon is not cruelty, it is false tenderness. False tenderness is the hook, cruelty is the leash. But false tenderness is what keeps you believing. There is a soul behind the mask that just needs time. Oh, now I want you to hear this clearly. The empath does not fall because they are foolish. The empath falls because they have a sacred longing. They believe in redemption. They believe in transformation. They believe love can heal, and in the right context, these are holy beliefs. But when given to a narcissistic structure, they become the very mechanism of exploitation. So, the narcissist collapses when you see the truth because your holy longing stops being available as fuel. Your empathy stops being a currency. Your forgiveness stops being a free resource. Your compassion stops being a doorway. But the narcissist does not accept this easily. The narcissistic psyche is like a drowning person, except it does not simply cling, it pulls you under. Now let us examine what happens in the empath at the moment of seeing, because this is equally important. Many of you think that seeing the truth means immediate liberation, but in fact, it often triggers an internal war. You see, the empath has two selves, the one who sees and the one who is trained. The one who sees says, "This is manipulation. This is not love. This is not soul. This is control. But the one who is trained, the inner child, the good daughter, the good son, the peacemaker says, "But what if I'm wrong? What if they really suffer? What if I abandon them? What if I'm cruel? What if I never find love again?" And so the empath begins to tremble between clarity and guilt, between truth and longing, between individuation and the old contract. This is why, in many cases, the empath leaves physically but remains psychologically attached. They stop contacting, but they still think, they still analyze, they still rehearse conversations. They still check the narcissist's social media. They still wait for an apology. They still imagine a future reconciliation. This is what I call the afterlife of the bond. Even when the relationship ends externally, the psychic imprint remains until the unconscious completes its work. And this is where we must speak of trauma bond, but not as a trendy term, rather as an archetypal phenomenon. Trauma bond is the binding of the psyche through alternating pain and reward. It creates a chemical addiction in the nervous system. Yes, but more importantly, it creates a mythic addiction in the soul, the belief that suffering is the price of love and endurance is proof of devotion. The empath often believes, if I can survive this, it means I am loyal, it means I am strong, it means I am worthy. Haifurzi, and the narcissist exploits this belief. They test your loyalty through cruelty. They measure your devotion through tolerance. They interpret your endurance as permission. The more you forgive, the more they believe they are entitled. So when you finally see the truth, you are not only breaking a relationship, you are breaking a myth, you are breaking a religion of suffering. And this is why the narcissist collapses, because they have been worshipped in your suffering, they have been enthroned in your endurance. The narcissist lives inside your sacrifice. Without your sacrifice, they are revealed. Now, I want to bring you into another dream image, because the psyche understands through dream long before it understands through lecture. Imagine you dream you are holding a beautiful bird, a bird with dazzling feathers. You love it, you cradle it, but every time you loosen your grip, it flutters wildly, as if it will escape. So you tighten your grip to keep it safe. And the tighter you grip, the more it struggles. And the more it struggles, the more you fear losing it. Until, finally, you grip so tightly that you feel something change in your hands. The bird goes still, and you look down, and it is dead. Then you wake in horror. This dream symbolizes the empath's tragic misunderstanding. They believe control is care. They believe holding tighter is love. They believe sacrifice is safety. But Real love requires freedom. Real love does not demand your self-erasure. The narcissist is like that bird in reverse. It looks beautiful, but cannot be held in mutuality. It can only be held through control. It cannot be loved into wholeness because it is defended against wholeness. And so the empath's holding becomes the very mechanism of destruction of the empath's soul. So when you finally see the truth, you loosen your grip, you stop holding, you stop chasing, and the narcissist who has relied on your grip for definition collapses into panic. Now, the narcissist's panic often triggers what I call the final theater, the last grand performance to regain the empath. This theater may appear in several forms. One form is the sudden awakening. The narcissist claims to have realized everything. They suddenly speak like a therapist. They name your wounds. They say, "I know I hurt you. I know I have issues. I want to change. Please don't leave." And the empath, whose soul longs for redemption, feels the old hope ignite like a candle. Another form is the victim performance. The narcissist says, "You're abandoning me. You're heartless. You never loved me. You're just like everyone else." They may cry. They may threaten self-destruction. They may tell others you abused them. This is designed to trigger your guilt and to recruit external witnesses who will pressure you back into the role. Another form is the rage. The narcissist becomes crueler than ever. They insult you, mock you, devalue you. They try to destroy your self-esteem so that you doubt your clarity. They want to reinsert confusion into your mind because confusion is their entry point. Another form is the replacement. The narcissist quickly finds a new supply and flaunts it. They want to punish you with visibility. "Look, I'm fine without you." But this too is theater, because the narcissist is rarely fine. They are simply avoiding the void. All of these are attempts to avoid collapse. Yet collapse is inevitable when the empath truly sees, because seeing changes the empath's vibration. It changes their nervous system's response. It changes their willingness to explain. And explanation is the narcissist's playground. Explanation is where they twist, distort, deny, and reverse. The empath seeing is the end of explanation. And here we reach one of the most important truths in this entire lecture. The empath's silence is not passive. It is an act of psychic sovereignty. When you stop explaining, you stop negotiating your reality. You stop asking permission to leave. You stop defending your boundaries. You stop proving your pain. You stop persuading someone to care. And this silence terrifies the narcissist because it removes the stage. It removes the courtroom. It removes the theater where they have been able to play victim, hero, martyr, misunderstood genius. In silence, the narcissist cannot manipulate language. They cannot twist your words. They cannot trap you into defending yourself. They cannot steal your energy through endless conversation. So they collapse. But what happens next is even more important. What happens in you after you see? Because the most dangerous moment for the empath is not when they are blind, it is when they are half awake. Half awake means you see the pattern but still crave the fantasy. Half awake means you know the truth but still hunger for a different ending. Half awake means you are trying to heal the narcissist with insight. You may think, if I show them this article, if I explain trauma, if I name the patterns, if I give them language, They will change. But insight is not transformation. Insight is merely light. And light, when shined on a narcissistic structure, often produces not humility but sophistication. The narcissist learns new words, new masks, new strategies. They become more dangerous because they now can imitate consciousness. So the empath must understand the moment you see the truth, your task is no longer to heal the narcissist. Your task is to reclaim your own psyche from the addictive bond. And this reclaiming is not instant. It is a process of mourning, because you are not only leaving a person, you are leaving a dream. You are leaving the image of what could have been. You are leaving the fantasy of being chosen. You are leaving the myth of being the one who finally heals the wounded prince. And mourning is sacred. Do not rush it. But mourning must not become attachment. Mourning must not become obsession. Mourning is the psyche releasing projection. It is the psyche retrieving its own energy from the other. Now I ask you, what did you project onto the narcissist? Did you project power? Did you project certainty? Did you project the ability to be selfish without guilt? Did you project masculinity or femininity or charisma? Did you project freedom? Often the narcissist carries what the empath has disowned. The empath disowns their own aggression, their own need, their own selfishness, their own refusal. They become too good, too pure, too accommodating, and so they are drawn to someone who embodies the forbidden opposite. This is shadow attraction. The narcissist is not only a predator, they are also a shadow magnet. They reveal where the empath has not individuated. They reveal where you have not yet claimed your own strength. So when you see the truth, you begin to reclaim your shadow. You begin to reclaim anger not as cruelty, but as boundary. You begin to reclaim selfishness, not as exploitation, but as self-preservation. You begin to reclaim refusal, not as rejection, but as dignity. And as you reclaim these things, the narcissist collapses further because they can no longer control you through your goodness. Your goodness, unbalanced by power, was a leash around your own neck. This is why I often say, the empath must become dangerous not to harm others, but to stop being harmed. They must develop a sacred coldness, a spiritual firmness, a sovereign refusal. Now, in the next movement of our lecture, I will take you deeper into the archetypal landscape, the empath's awakening as a descent into the underworld, the narcissist as the archetype of the false king, the role of the mother and father complexes in empathic overgiving, and why the empath seeing is not merely personal, it is the beginning of a lineage shift. Now, my dear friends, let us enter the underworld of this pattern, because everything we have described so far, panic, raga, love bombing, collapse, are merely the surface waves of a much deeper sea. If you truly want liberation, you must not only understand the narcissist, you must understand why your soul was willing to kneel in that temple for so long. For the deepest bondage is never maintained merely by the chains of another. It is maintained by the invisible devotion of the captive. And so we descend. When the empath finally sees the truth, something ancient happens in the psyche. A forgotten archetype awakens. It is not the archetype of the healer, not the archetype of the good one, not even the archetype of the victim, it is the archetype of the seer. And the seer is a dangerous figure because the seer cannot be bribed by illusion. The seer does not negotiate with appearances. The seer does not beg the mask to become a face. The seer recognizes the mask as mask, and in that recognition the spell ends. In myth, the seer is often blind on the outside, because the truth is never gained through ordinary sight. Tiresias loses his outer vision and gains inner vision. The seer sacrifices the comfort of shared illusion in order to hold fidelity to the real. And this is why people fear seers. Seers disturb the collective trance. They do not merely leave a toxic system, they reveal it. So when the empath sees, they become Tiresias inside their own life. They begin to perceive what they formerly could not perceive, that the narcissist is not confused about what they are doing. They are not merely immature. They are not merely wounded. There is calculation. There is intentionality. There is a hidden economy in the relationship. And once you see the economy, you can no longer pretend you are simply in love. You realize you are inside a psychic marketplace where your pain is being traded for their power. At this point, many empaths experience an unbearable inner crisis, not because they miss the narcissist as a person, but because they miss the fantasy of what their sacrifice meant. The empath must face the terrifying possibility that their endurance was not proof of devotion, it was proof of conditioning. Their patience was not holiness, it was training. Their forgiveness was not spiritual superiority, it was a survival adaptation learned in childhood. This is why awakening hurts. It is not only the loss of the narcissist, it is the loss of the empath's self-image. For so long you believed, I am the one who loves deeply, I am the one who understands, I am the one who can hold pain and still remain gentle. And these qualities are real. But then comes the shadow revelation. I also stayed because I was afraid. I stayed because I did not believe I deserved mutuality. I stayed because leaving felt like betrayal. I stayed because I wanted to win love, the way I used to win love as a child, through suffering. If you will, to stool. And there it is, the true underworld gate, the family script. Let us speak plainly, without cruelty, but without softness that hides truth. Many empaths are not too loving, they are too loyal to the wrong altar. Their loyalty is not to reality. Their loyalty is to childhood programming. They learned very early that love is unstable, mood-based, conditional. Perhaps they had a mother who needed emotional caretaking. Perhaps they had a father who was absent, unpredictable, critical. Perhaps they grew up in a household where the child had to become the adult. The child learned, if I read everyone perfectly, if I anticipate needs, if I carry tension, I will be safe. That child grows up and becomes what modern language calls an empath. But you must understand, empathy, in this case, is not merely sensitivity, it is hypervigilance coated in spirituality. So when the narcissist enters your life, they feel strangely familiar. Their unpredictability feels like home. Their coldness feels like the old winter in the living room. Their sudden warmth feels like the rare moment you were finally praised. Your nervous system recognizes the rhythm, not because it is good, but because it is known, and the psyche is drawn to what is known, even when it is poisonous, because the known gives the illusion of control. You believe, if I can master this pattern, I will finally heal my past. This is the hidden contract. The empath does not only want love, the empath wants to rewrite history. So you stay, not just for the person, but for the child in you who is still waiting for an impossible miracle. If I can finally make the cold one love me, then I will be worthy. Then my pain will have meaning. Then I will be redeemed and disquieting. And the narcissist, sensing this hunger, exploits it, not always consciously, like a criminal, plotting in the dark, sometimes instinctively, like a creature who knows where the blood is. They sense your longing to be chosen. They sense your hunger for approval. They sense your terror of abandonment. And they play upon it like an instrument. They become the conductor of your nervous system. This is why I tell you, the narcissist does not only manipulate your mind, they manipulate your body. The empath's body begins to live in cycles of cortisol and dopamine, anxiety and relief, panic and reunion, pain and tenderness. The relationship becomes an addiction because it is neurologically patterned like one, and yet the soul participates too. Because the soul confuses addiction with destiny when it has not yet individuated. Now, when the empath finally sees the truth, the nervous system enters withdrawal. You may experience symptoms that feel like insanity, obsessive thinking, deep grief, sudden numbness, shaking, insomnia, strange dreams, a sense of spiritual disorientation. Many empaths assume this means they made a mistake by leaving, but no, this is simply the psyche cleansing itself of a trance. Because narcissistic relationships are trances, they are not built on stable reality. They are built on shifting perceptions. Gaslighting is not merely lying, it is psychic fog. It makes you doubt your own inner compass. It makes you abandon your intuition. It makes you outsource your reality to the narcissist's narrative. And the empath, because they are sensitive and self-questioning, becomes highly vulnerable to this. You begin to believe, maybe I am too much. Maybe I am too emotional. Maybe I am the problem. And slowly you move further and further away from the self. So the moment you finally see the truth is the moment you begin to return to the self, and that return is like a spiritual earthquake. It shakes every false adaptation, it rattles every inherited vow, and here the narcissist collapses for the deepest reason of all, because your seeing removes their access to your unconscious. As long as you were unaware, the narcissist could enter your shadow through the back door. They could weaponize your guilt. They could weaponize your empathy. They could weaponize your need to be good. But when you see those doors close, the empath becomes psychologically sealed. This is why the narcissist will often try to reopen the door using the most ancient key, shame. Shame is the narcotic of control. They may say, you're selfish. They may say, you're cold. They may say, after everything I did for you. They may accuse you of cruelty, betrayal, abandonment. They may twist your boundaries into sins. They may present your self-respect as narcissism. And this is where many empaths tremble, because they have been trained to fear being seen as bad. I want you to truly absorb this. Many empaths would rather suffer than be perceived as cruel. They would rather remain in captivity than be accused of selfishness. They would rather die inside than be the villain in someone else's story. And the narcissist knows this, so they hold your fear of being bad like a knife at your throat. But individuation requires something shocking. It requires that you become willing to be misunderstood. It requires that you become willing to be disliked. It requires that you become willing to disappoint. Because the self cannot emerge in a life where the ego is enslaved to approval. This is the spiritual task of the empath, to stop using goodness as camouflage for fear. True goodness is not the inability to say no. True goodness is the ability to remain loving without surrendering the self. True goodness includes firmness. True goodness includes protective aggression. True goodness includes the sacred boundary. And this is where the empath's shadow becomes holy. You see, the empath often has an underdeveloped shadow. Their shadow contains rage, selfishness, refusal, sexuality, ambition, power. It is all the things they were taught were dangerous. Many were raised with messages like, don't be too loud, don't be too needy, don't be too selfish, don't make trouble, be good. So they push power into the unconscious. They become angelic on the surface and starving underneath. The narcissist enters this starvation like a predator entering a forest, because the narcissist has power, distorted power, exploitative power, theatrical power, and the empath finds it mesmerizing. They are drawn to it because their own power is unconscious. They experience the narcissist as strong because they cannot yet access their own strength. They experience the narcissist as certain because they have been trained to doubt. They experience the narcissist as free because they have been trained to serve. So the relationship is also a shadow initiation. It forces the empath to confront their disowned power. And when the empath finally sees the truth, they reclaim that power not as domination, but as sovereignty. Here we arrive at the archetype of the false king. In mythology, the false king is a ruler who has stolen legitimacy. He sits on the throne, but the land becomes barren under his rule. People suffer, life loses fertility, creativity dries up. The false king is often sustained by sacrifice, others giving their lives to maintain his reign. But when the true hero arrives, the hero does not defeat the false king by imitating tyranny. The hero defeats him by exposing the lie and restoring the rightful order. The narcissist is the false king of your inner world. When you are trauma bonded, they become the ruler of your attention, your emotion, your self-definition. Your inner land becomes barren. You lose creativity. You lose joy. You lose spontaneity. You become exhausted because your life force is being taxed by a false ruler. And the empath seeing is the arrival of the true hero not outside, but within. The hero is the self rising through the ruins of the ego. This is why the narcissist collapses, because the true king returns to the inner kingdom. Now, what does collapse look like in its most archetypal form? It looks like the unmasking. The narcissist's greatest terror is being seen without the mask. Their identity is built on curated image, so when the empath sees, the empath becomes a mirror that no longer reflects the illusion, and in that moment the narcissist often begins to show a terrifying face. Contempt. The contempt was always there, but it was hidden behind charm. The empath suddenly realizes, this person does not respect me. This person does not love me. This person enjoys my confusion, forced. This realization is devastating because it shatters the empath's sacred projection. The belief that the narcissist's cruelty was accidental, or unconscious, or regrettable. When that projection dies, the bond breaks. But then comes another underworld trial, grief. The empath grieves not only the relationship, they grieve themselves, the version of themselves that tried so hard, the version of themselves that waited, explained, forgave. The empath may feel embarrassed. How did I not see it sooner? They may feel angry. I gave everything. They may feel hollow. Who am I now? This is where many empaths become vulnerable to returning, not because they love the narcissist, but because they cannot tolerate the emptiness after the spell breaks. The emptiness feels like withdrawal. The mind says, at least in the relationship I felt something. Even pain can feel like life when the psyche is addicted to intensity. So the empath must learn a new form of spiritual discipline, to tolerate quiet. Quiet is not loneliness. Quiet is detox, and detox is sacred suffering, the kind of suffering that heals, not the kind that enslaves. At this stage, dreams often become fierce. The psyche begins to process the shadow material. Many empaths dream of dark houses, locked rooms, ex-lovers appearing as demons or kings, mirrors shattering, oceans, storms, animals biting or protecting them. These images are not random. They are the unconscious attempting to reorganize itself after years of distortion. For example, you may dream of being chased. This symbolizes the narcissist's psychic presence still pursuing your energy. You may dream of trying to speak but having no voice. This symbolizes years of self-silencing. You may dream of killing someone or being killed. This symbolizes the death of the false self or the death of a pattern, not literal death. You may dream of rescuing a child. This symbolizes the retrieval of your inner child from the narcissistic temple. I want you to understand, after seeing the truth, your unconscious begins to help you. It starts sending symbols to complete the separation. It begins to withdraw libido from the narcissist image and return it to your own self-image. In plain language, you start becoming alive again. And that aliveness, my dear friends, is what the narcissist cannot tolerate. Because the narcissist's deepest envy is not your beauty, not your success, not your money. It is your aliveness. It is your capacity to feel. It is your capacity to connect. It is your inner richness. The narcissist does not only want to be admired, they want to possess the aliveness they lack. And since they cannot truly possess it, they attempt to control it. They drain it. They fragment it. They make you smaller so they feel larger. So when you awaken, when your aliveness begins to return, the narcissist collapses further into envy, hatred, or frantic pursuit. They may try to sabotage you. They may try to humiliate you. They may try to provoke a reaction, because your peace is proof of their failure. Your peace says, you no longer own me, weakhuds. Now, there is one more layer, perhaps the most mystical layer of all. Sometimes the narcissist collapses not only because you leave, but because you see through the archetype. You recognize that the narcissist was an initiation, a dark teacher, an agent of individuation. This is a difficult idea for modern minds. because they want to separate spirituality from pain, but the psyche does not. The psyche uses pain as fire. Without fire, gold cannot be made. In alchemy, the first stage is nigredo, the blackening. The soul enters darkness. It feels abandoned, betrayed, destroyed. It is the death of innocence. It is the shattering of naive hope. Narcissistic entanglement is often a nigredo experience for the empath. It forces the empath into darkness. But if the empath remains unconscious, they stay in nigredo forever. They become cynical, bitter, numb. They say, love is a lie. They become closed. Yet, if the empath sees the truth, nigredo becomes initiation. The blackness becomes a womb. From that darkness, a new consciousness emerges, albedo. The whitening clarity, purification, spiritual sight, and eventually rubedo, the reddening embodied power, sacred passion, sovereignty. So when the empath sees the truth, they are moving from nigredo into albedo. They are no longer blind. They are no longer dreaming inside the relationship. They are waking up. And this awakening is what collapses the narcissist, because the narcissist thrives on dreaming minds. The narcissist thrives on unconscious lovers. The narcissist thrives on people who live through hope rather than reality. But you once awakened cannot be harvested. You become, in symbolic terms, a fire that cannot be contained, and that is why the narcissist collapses. Because they were never prepared to meet a whole human being, they were only prepared to meet a mirror. In the final movement of our lecture, we will complete the circle, what the empath must do after seeing, how to seal the psyche so the narcissist cannot return through guilt or nostalgia, how to transform rage into sacred boundary, and how the empath's truth becomes the death of the old lineage, contract, the end of inherited self-erasure, and the beginning of a new life where love is no longer earned through suffering. And now, my dear friends, we arrive at the last threshold, the place where understanding must become embodiment. For you can listen to a lecture and feel illuminated. You can name the mechanisms. You can recognize the archetypes and yet still remain bound. Why? Because the narcissistic entanglement is not only a story in the mind. It is a pattern in the blood. It is a rhythm in the nervous system. It is a vow in the unconscious. So the final question is not merely, do you see? The final question is, will you live what you see? Because the moment the empath sees the truth, the world does not instantly become peaceful. On the contrary, the psyche often becomes more turbulent, like a lake disturbed by a stone. In the beginning, the empath may feel a strange mixture of relief and grief, power and terror, clarity and longing. These contradictions are not weakness. They are the signs of transformation. Every initiation produces trembling. So let us speak of what must happen after seeing, so that the seeing becomes irreversible. The first task is the most difficult for the empath, to accept that truth does not always feel kind. You have been trained to make truth gentle. You have been trained to soften reality, to protect other people's feelings. You have been trained to phrase boundaries like apologies. And this is why the narcissist found you so useful, because the narcissist does not feel guilt the way you do. The narcissist feels entitlement. and entitlement consumes softness. So after seeing the truth, you must learn an entirely new spiritual posture, non-negotiable reality. Reality means if it harms me, it is not love. To do, reality means if it requires me to abandon myself, it is not destiny. Do, reality means if it is based on confusion and fear, it is not intimacy, health. These are not affirmations, they are laws. And here I must warn you of something subtle and very dangerous. After you awaken, the narcissist may attempt to return through what I call the nostalgia doorway. Nostalgia is one of the narcissist's most refined weapons. Because it is not obviously manipulative, it appears romantic, it appears tender, it appears like memory. But nostalgia, in a trauma bond, is not memory, it is trance. It pulls you back into the false beginning. It makes you forget the pattern and remember only the moments that were designed to bind you. The empath often becomes trapped by a particular image, the early days, the intense eye contact, the feeling of being chosen, the myth of a soul connection, and the narcissist will often exploit this by returning with phrases like, "No one understands me like you. You're the only one. We had something special. I've never loved anyone like this." These phrases are not proof of love, they are proof of strategy. They aim at your archetypal wound, the longing to be irreplaceable. But you must understand, the narcissist does not return because they finally see your value. They return because they finally feel the absence of your supply. Your absence is unbearable not because you are loved, but because you were useful. This is bitter medicine, yet bitter medicine heals. So, the empath's second task after seeing is to seal the psyche against re-enchantment. How does one seal the psyche? Not through hatred. Hatred is still attachment. Not through vengeance. Vengeance binds you to the other. The psyche is sealed through a sacred act. Withdrawal of projection. Projection is the psychic act of placing your own inner material onto another person. You projected goodness onto the narcissist. You projected potential onto them. You projected hidden tenderness. You projected the redeemable child. And because of this projection, you could not see what was in front of you. So, the way to seal the psyche is to retrieve all that you projected. You must say inwardly, "The tenderness I saw was my own longing for tenderness. The future I imagined was my own creative power. The devotion I gave was my own capacity for loyalty. The depth I believed there was my own depth." And when you reclaim these things, something astonishing happens. The narcissist becomes smaller in your psyche. They stop appearing like fate. They stop appearing like the great love. They become what they always were, a person enacting a pattern. This is liberation, not the demonization of the narcissist, but the demystification. Now we must speak of the empath's rage, because it is an inevitable stage of awakening. Many spiritual people fear rage, as if rage is evil. But rage is not evil. Rage is life force returning. Rage is the psyche announcing that a boundary was violated. Rage is the soul's immune system. The empath often suppressed rage for years. They feared it would make them bad. They feared it would make them selfish. They feared it would make them unlovable. So rage went underground, where it became depression, exhaustion, numbness, chronic pain, anxiety. But after seeing the truth, rage comes up like a volcano, and this is sacred if it is guided. Unguided rage becomes destruction. Guided rage becomes protection. So your third task is to alchemize rage into boundary. Boundary is not an explanation. Boundary is an act. Boundary is not, please understand my feelings, for boundary is, no, will it. The narcissist collapses when the empath finally sees, because seeing produces this no, this refusal that is not emotional bargaining, but finality. And here is something even more mystical. When you say no from the self, the unconscious hears it as a new law, not just your conscious mind, but your entire lineage, because many of your ancestors, especially the women in your lineage, may not have been allowed to say no. They survived through silence. They survived through endurance. They survived through pleasing. So when you say no, you are not only changing your relationship, you are changing the ancestral script of survival. This is why the empath's awakening feels like it has enormous weight. It does. And now, my dear friends, let us speak of the greatest trap after awakening, the desire for closure. The empath often believes, if they finally admit what they did, I will be free. And 19. But this is another illusion. Because the narcissist rarely gives closure, they give confusion, denials, distortions, partial confessions that create hope again. Seeking closure from the narcissist is like seeking water from a poisoned well. The more you drink, the sicker you become. So the empath must learn the fourth task, self-closure. Self-closure means, I do not need your acknowledgement to trust my experience. Forced. Self-closure means, I do not need your apology to validate my pain. I thank. Self-closure means, I do not need your explanation to leave. Is bustle. This is not bitterness. This is spiritual maturity. In truth, closure does not come from the other. Closure comes from the psyche reclaiming its own authority. Now I will speak of a final archetypal image, because it contains the entire lesson. Imagine a dream. You are in a dark forest carrying a lantern. Beside you walks a figure in a cloak. Sometimes the figure is kind, sometimes cruel, sometimes they help you. Sometimes they push you into mud. For a long time you believe you need them to navigate, but eventually you look down and realize the lantern is yours. You have been carrying the light all along. The cloaked figure never guided you, they only followed your light. And then you stop. You turn toward the figure, you lift the lantern higher, and the figure recoils, and you see, for the first time, their true face, not monstrous necessarily, but empty, hungry, frightened. Then you realize they were not the source of your light. They were feeding from it, and in that moment you take the lantern, and you walk away. The forest does not vanish, but you are no longer afraid, because you now know you are the light. This is what happens when the empath finally sees. The narcissist collapses because the narcissist was never the sun. They were a creature orbiting your glow. Now, there is one more necessary truth. After seeing, the empath often fears becoming narcissistic themselves. They fear that boundaries make them cold, They fear that self-protection makes them selfish. They fear that power makes them cruel. But these fears are the residue of conditioning. The difference between individuation and narcissism is simple. Narcissism is the inflation of the ego at the expense of others. Individuation is the emergence of the self in relationship to others without self-erasure. A whole human being does not require domination. A whole human being does not require worship. A whole human being does not require sacrifice. A whole human being can love without losing themselves. So your task is not to become hardened. Your task is to become integrated. Integration means you keep your sensitivity, but you add discernment. You keep your compassion, but you add boundaries. You keep your openness, but you add sovereignty. You do not kill the empath, you mature the empath. And when you mature the empath, something extraordinary happens. You become unrecognizable to the narcissistic system. Because narcissism can only feed on unconscious empathy. It cannot feed on conscious empathy. Conscious empathy says, I feel you, but I am not responsible for you, for inciting. Conscious empathy says, I understand your pain, but I will not become your container. To one dude, conscious empathy says, I wish you healing, but I will not sacrifice myself to ibisers. This is why the narcissist collapses, because conscious empathy is a closed door. It does not allow parasitism. Now, we must speak of the final stage of this journey, love after narcissistic entanglement. Many empaths fear they will never love again, or they fear they will only attract narcissists forever. But this fear is also a spell. It is the spell of the old identity, the empath as martyr. When you individuate, you change your energetic signature. You stop vibrating at the frequency of rescue. You stop vibrating at the frequency of proving. You stop vibrating at the frequency of earning love. And because of this, the type of person you attract changes. You begin to recognize red flags instantly, not intellectually. But in the body, you begin to feel peace as erotic, not boring. You begin to value consistency more than intensity. You begin to respect those who respect you. You begin to trust what is stable. And this is the true triumph. The empath no longer needs a narcissist to awaken. They awaken through themselves. So when we ask, why does the narcissist collapse when the empath finally sees the truth? The ultimate answer is this: because the narcissist's entire structure depends on the empath staying unconscious. It depends on your hope being blind. It depends on your empathy being exploited. It depends on your goodness being unprotected. It depends on your fear of being bad. But when you see the truth, you reclaim your shadow, you reclaim your boundaries, you reclaim your authority, you reclaim your light, you stop sacrificing yourself to maintain someone else's false self. And in that moment, the narcissistic structure loses its oxygen. It collapses not because you destroy it, but because you stop feeding it. And now I will leave you with this final, quiet, mystical truth. The empath's awakening is not revenge, it is restoration. You are not here to punish the narcissist. You are here to return to the self. And when you return to the self, the false kingdoms in your life naturally fall because they cannot survive in the presence of truth.